Sanje chedan soki chonam la chanju pardo dani kyabsunje bhage jinso ye pe chonam ki rola panjira sanye ro parasho sanje chedan soki chonam la chanju pardo dani kyabsunje bhage jinso ye pe chonam ki rola panjira sanye ro parasho Sanje chedan soki chonam chanju pardo dani kyabsunche bhage shinso yebe chonam ki rola panjire sanje ruparasho simchen tamche dewa dan devi gyudan dembarak simchen tamche dungal dan dungal ji gyudan trawarak simchen tamche dungal mepe dewa dan mindawarak Simchen tamche nyirin chadan nidang chak tanyam la ne para kyuru chi Simchen tamche dewa dewe gyudang dembara kyuchi Simchen tamche dungal dang dungal ji gyudang chawara Simchen tamche dungal dewa dang mindra wara kyuchi Simchen tamche nyirin chadan nidang chak tanyam la ne para kyuru chi Samjan tam dewa dan dewe yudan dambara Samjan tamje lungal dan lungal ji yudan tawar Samjan tamje lungal mebe dewa dan mindawar Samjan tamje nyirin chadan nidan ta tanyamla ne para gyurji Sajbe oje
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, by the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, by the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, and the sun and the moon. I imagine as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Yiram Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryata Yami.
Konge dujinye zonwa tawa tamje pambe jira tambe chuni tamze be kodam tela cha za lo. Ya da. Pomar kangala rashidile serwa. Da chui nyeshe chidi kanla kunong de pe misiba kai chenpo chadi yore. Kunong de samba changchu ki semgi zimba chiyo de shivuji kai chenpo re. Yani neki kyun sumda chal. Tungen dushi tu tsangwa ni nyangwa de pe misiba kai chenpo chadi yore se.
Good Sunday afternoon, everyone. Tashitale. And now, at the time of listening to the instructions, listening to the teachings, it's very, very important to set the intention, set a pure intention of bodhicitta, meaning that we listen to these teachings with the perfectly pure intention of bodhicitta, the wish to gain enlightenment for the purpose of benefiting all sentient beings. And holding this motivation while you listen to these instructions, receive these instructions, is incredibly, incredibly important. It is really the way, the way that all faults are pacified. This is an utter pure intention that completely is free of any faults. And so to hear the instructions and listen to the instructions, receive them in this way is incredibly important.
Dunzi mangru, any Karsore, any Chadong Monsum Pegis Ruguyana, should choose to go on Pentago Mare.
And so what is the reason actually that we listen to the Dharma? Why is it that we need to receive these instructions? That is for the purpose that within one's mind stream, the afflictive emotions, the afflicted mental states diminish, they decline. And also so that a certainty in these instructions, a certainty in the Dharma arises. For if one were to have the afflictive emotions increase, grow stronger and stronger, that would be of no, and one's clinging, fixation to grow stronger and stronger, our feelings of attachment and repulsions and aversions and our delusion and confusion, if that were to increase, there's no benefit in that at all.
Chasandati, she was catching which higher. But Jumden the choose sooner go back to the Karzana, Semjin Yuki, Numunjia Tamchidala, shake it Sumbrua. What I Chazantini in the Gala, Numun Kanle Kagi Ji, Zanzin the Marie Badan, around Chepers and Jinzilla, so nothing the Matsune, Genji to us. Tendikala, Nyomung yu magala, Nyomung Katuya Yamare, Ranchinzin Nyomung yu, Nyomung Kag yu. Oh, you the Ranchinzin the down, Rancheprins in Chinzin the down, the Emperors in Benzin Dignity. That under the Capitolato, Ranchinzin the Lacan Shujo to us. What that thing, Dugala, Maranzote, New to Gore. Nana, the shoe chumbo, some Diana. The Kenjin Dochakigre, Jidan, and Jidan Kigre, Tato Kigre, Margel Kigre, Jeza, Tato Jidan Margel, Mazo, Makiba Lemsang Zuyungua.
Makiba,
Kibumea. Lemsang Zuguas, Yamazu, Samlo Nenden, Tana Hakway was, Ratu was. 윤도 삼다 녀몽 라 꾼도 따와데 빼 미시베 개침보레스.
And so this is a very, very important point. And the Buddha taught the entirety of the Dharma teachings, as it is said, for the sole purpose of pacifying the afflictions of sentient beings. And therefore, these afflicted mental states, such as self-clinging, ignorance, fixating to a true existent reality. These are all, in order to shine light upon these, in order to eliminate these, the Buddha taught the teachings. And within the mind stream, as especially harmful to us, are clinging to a self, having a self-cherishing attitude. When we come from the perspective of a self-clinging and self-cherishing perspective, this alone is a great fault. This is actually leads to our own ruin, actually. And so we really need to work on decreasing the states of mind that arise that are harmful like this. And for example, when these states arise in the mind, we can look at them. When we have really strong desire, like just really fixating desire, or deep and burning hatred or jealousy, look at the mind. These really disturb the mind. These do not bring any peace to the mind at all. Actually, the mind immediately, as soon as we are either burning with desire or fuming with hatred, immediately we can see what happens in the mind. Examine this. And so really the very first thing that we must do at the outset is see the mistake in these mental states, see how they're harmful, see how they're faulty and mistaken. We need to identify that.
개회 쪽에서 맞게도 윤도 쇼다당 아니 녀모적게 셈 개베갑라 아니 텔레 견도 통네 견도 따지 견도 땅고 따고 아니 견도 곰기 견도 통해요 견도 통해서나 순진베 톱징이데 차거라 순진시드가라 콜레 견도 마통나 순진에 거라요 말와 어다 된디게 견도 따 녀모로 견도 따고데 pen 미스베 개치모레 녀몽을 견도 마도네 녀몽 탄돌레나 둥알 단당아조 둥알 찌 마세간라 야 둥알 냄베 조용 거도와
되네 둥알 년
지 둥알 가마 마세간라 치마 행결 둥알 쟁겨와 맞죠 둥알 너고 말와 둥알 만드나 둥알 강 렘버제베 녀몽데 간지 견도 따네 때 칼레라 메바 조고도와 이 셈상기 이 견데 갈레레 메바소기로 마도 치주제나진 잘라포나지 포야 요마르와 아니 견도 타게 칼레 슈충다네 아니 대단 디치네 아니 개위초데 잠바다 니지데서 윤덴도 타 아니 칼레 라테페 공펠도 당고래다 메소지네 선운단 렌사 메침부 자야로 싱망부타네 메소리지나 아니 선음루데 메 첨부 바레 렘상 조에요와 그게 초된 렘상 또 첨부로에 가버려 그 셈기 윤덴데 칼레 콤베도기 아니 곰기 아니 또 치루 되니 유소 용수 상도 갈라데 아니 피타부 차고래 엔 맞아 제마타도 렘상 그거 또 진요에 가버려 Yena Kang Chevadala Jisu Yanache, any pay Mimi began the Jisu Yanachin Luciani, young top chamber chagujiore. It's a misbecation.
So first, we have to really recognize what's arising and acknowledge it. Acknowledge it that these unwholesome attitudes are not beneficial to us at all. They really don't help. So really always be examining the state of your mind. Are you more involved in a virtuous mindset, attitude, and activities, or so negative and non-virtue? And when you notice that you have really strayed into negativity, strayed into non-virtuous actions, then right away you need to employ the power of really the resolve of not doing that. It's, really, first we have to see it as negative, or we won't, and how harmful it is, or we won't pledge to not do it again. So that's very, very important, to see negativity as something harmful and to pledge not to do it again, to really work towards that. Because if we're just accepting of our negativity and we put up with it and we don't do anything to counteract it, then all that will happen is more suffering. From the negativity, we will just experience more suffering. And again, we will suffer. And we don't want to suffer, actually. We don't desire to suffer. So we must really look at this with open eyes, very eyes wide open. And we must slowly, slowly work to eliminate this negativity. Work to more and more go towards the side of virtue rather than non-virtue. Because it is we ourselves that need to work to eliminate the negative emotional states. It's not like we can dispose of it somewhere else. We can't just get rid of it somewhere else. We ourselves must work to eliminate it. And how is that done? That's done by really striving more towards the virtuous side of things, being more loving, being more compassionate, being more positive, the virtuous qualities. See actually the qualities in virtue. When you see the qualities in virtue, you'll be more likely to undertake virtue more and more. And it's really something that we need to slowly build up to. To get the big and roaring fire, we don't throw all the firewood all on at once. This is not something that really helps to build a big and strong and lasting fire. So slowly, slowly going forward, we need to be just like putting a little more firewood and a little more firewood. We need to work to be, familiarize ourselves in this and make it a habit, slowly, slowly. Virtue and, really being, very virtuous, very good is not something, that comes all at once. It's difficult, actually, but what we should do is we should do it as much as we can now. And when we have had some, good virtuous experiences and we've done well with this, we should rejoice, recognize it, rejoice that you've done it, and build it up like that.
Any Luginjun, Nubanyamdogore, Lusung Yamdogore. What is Jumba level of similar Popa, Tronang Yovitone, Popa Yovitone, any Chigina, any Co Mazut, the Denamason, Yonsus of a took 2 yare.
Kare took
Popa, Dodun, Sosu, Kukujora, Dodunde, the beton de Beton. The similar Popa than Tronang where the Pemisification Borda.
Oh, lasso.
Sem kibu yongaya de. Susu sogor mada kibu nyue yomarwa. Susu sogores. Indugala pe. Jumden dene sungdoa. Sem kipane dewale, sem kipale dewan denzer sungdoa. Kibu sede. Chi lui chi twingen sama samza mare. Nang seminang twingen sane. Seminang 지 대화지 좋아하는 때 대화돼 때 시작이 야가요래 무슨 초요래 제가 샘 기부 균도 샘 기부제데 샘라 토난제 샘 줌발레 맞추고 제야데 빼미지게 침보래
And so working with the mind, working towards virtue, especially now in the world, there's so much suffering worldwide with this disease that is now a pandemic. There's really so much suffering, actually. And we are all in that experience and part of that, but we should not be discouraged. It's very important that we hold an attitude of confidence and of interest and of optimism, because as soon as we become pessimistic, discouraged, we can even say ticked off at it all that does is harm our own physical vitality, physically and mentally. So this mental discouragement really then will affect us physically. And so it's very, very important that we don't go in that direction, but rather find some inspiration here, find some confidence here. And with this, confidence, we can, be happy. We can find some happiness in all of this. Actually, it's we ourselves who have to establish that happiness. Happiness cannot be bought anywhere else. We must establish it ourselves. And the Buddha has said that it is the mind that establishes our pleasure, our happiness. And so our happiness doesn't come from making sure all that we have and all of our outer circumstances are just so. That does not establish our happiness. Our happiness comes from from inside. The happiness is something we ourselves establish inside. And that's what the Buddha was saying. And this is just incredibly helpful and important to know. It is the mind that establishes our happiness. Without that, we will not find happiness.
다 그상 가르쳐래. 3대니 주나 그상 쇼로가 주지기 강파 치마니당 정하게 강파 땅보들 내기도 와. 아직 맞아 그상 집에 삼로.
That's what sure. 아니 근데 춘이기 식 강파
쇼로가 줍지바데.
줍시바기
강파타 치마니데.
Okay, 치마니.
아니 주숨기 줍지자데 정하게 강파 땅보. 간진데는 치수마다 민도 단다디 봉의 술세다. ngazo rang jinjing yoro jibe samlo rang jibu samlo da ji do de samlo de kan se pang gure se te ke ji she gore di rang jibu samlo da de be jibe samlo de ki ta pe lungal mango jin deng yor ba de me wa so go ra ba de me zo da de sung go re se
oh la so. And so now picking back up in where we left off, so we are in the way of the Bodhisattva, and we are in the 8th chapter on meditative concentration, And we're at verse 14, where we're looking at the final 2 lines of that. And what is being discussed here within this particular verse has been about the harmfulness of being really self-cherishing, just focused on oneself, very narrow-minded. Really, everything is about oneself, very rigid in attitude, and how actually, if we're like this, we just bring ourselves suffering. This causes us suffering. And so how do we eliminate this? How do we work with this? So this is where we pick up.
Ram pechibu samdandugala chachimandina lemsang dalmandije any someday as any munyomoke lemsang yongdo any ranchin chizam shuche yendegenla nana naza de jigota naza the tire yomarde doctor dang yormuji kamena dugala ten yongudu the yormus sumdo
la so ani nasa kandre
naza de
Semtinata luginata.
Luginata yona tele jichedang, trialong goreadang, tendio. Any jimpen samtang and midela, Naza yona yang, tria lela, soya lela, tendio mudus and sundua. Be chigi, American doctor than the sundus, yormuch sundu.
Oh, lasso.
Tindula, she was catchambora. Chazamazo, Dungal Dugo, Maradungal Mandana, Tati, Tendiji. Dungal dringiana, the Calais, la Merzoya, Capsitan, Merzoa, the Ketchmudua.
And so when we talk about someone like this is someone who really only thinks about themselves. So as soon as they are involved in other situations, it doesn't take long before they're miserable, because all they think about are themselves, and the world doesn't work in that way. And so it doesn't come long before they're miserable and they're worried, they're afflicted. And actually, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and also doctors, Western medicine, have recognized that from this kind of an attitude, people who are really self-centered, this can mentally, obviously, this, as we've said, the afflictions, all of a sudden they're miserable, they're worried, they're just not happy. And also physically, they become sick. And because of what is perpetuating this sickness, actually, there aren't any methods to cure this. This is something that you can't take medicine for and cure. But people who are optimistic, that care about others, that are open-minded and focused instead of all on themselves, are focused on other people and, and their happiness, that, others' happiness. These are people that are happy and healthy. And even if they do get sick, and they might get sick, but they're able to take medicine and get better. This heals. Whereas really rigid, self-centered, tight, egotistic people become sick, and they stay sick. And this is really important for us to know, because we want to be happy and healthy. And we want to know methods to establish that happiness and healthiness. So we need to know ways to eliminate, self-cherishing and so forth.
Papa, Tony Madonna Chibas yang Topanye Mania Chipas Jayadua, Chipaja, the Chibin Tanya Sumdua.
Hola, so then a campo dang sumpa hakos on Nipa country?
Nipa, Mazo Lojogi, Nasugi Chipa. 나스 로첩게 menjela 집바스 거라 부충충슬라 거라
Oh, di duzzo ki kola.
오 로
Oh,
로
la,
로나 마성겐달라 집바세야지
lasso.
삼르거니 집바세야지 엔 똥니 마토나 양 집바세야지 집에 당연 숨여레스 단다디 집바세야데 삼루푸수 또보페 하 시데 베 삼단데겐 딜랍 거래 삼류토니 집바드레
And so here in the text, in regard to these, these kinds of people, self-cherishing and so forth, this people that are like this, it's called childish here in the text. They use the word childish. And actually in the context of Buddhist teachings, we can understand childish there's a few different ways that childish is being used. In one way, it is someone who is very it's about the mind. It's about like their immaturity of mind, thinking only about themselves, never be open to anything but their own ideas. For them, it's about me. So that's one. And then the second is young or immature in age, meaning childish. They're just young, they're young. And then thirdly, someone who has not yet realized emptiness, someone who is immature in that sense. They haven't realized emptiness, still an ordinary person without realization. That's also referred to as childish. So here among the three different ways that childish is defined from Buddhist perspective, this is the first in terms of the mind. So we had one in terms of the thinking, one in terms of age, and one in terms of whether realization of emptiness has come about.
Oda tatinen 대경 같은 맞을라서 다 된된 주시도 된된 지도 집어수시교 계산하면 로선 집어수시교 해야지. 다 삼루배 푸수도 보. 나제다 삼루 콘데긴 딜랄라 거래. 어떻게 근데게 삼루 콘데게 삼루 나가서 삼루 콘데긴 되기 수수돈다다 주비에요 말했어. 라경 딘디지도나 라경 대든 민주라스 딜라네 젬펜제겐 양 로제겐 지어나 되게 로봇지 투비에요 말 그런데 넌진슈 춤부여베 왕기 나즈 슈추부 왕기 쟁기 로봇잖아 로제 카보요레스
로체
로바제 돈다지 돈다 두비야
라서 로바체
디 돈두비야라 백 카보요레스
야
민주라스 집에 레터 링워 졸라자스 다 텐디 리가라 직당 가서를 텐디 돈 깨게 두야요 말레스 텐디 미들라 돈다베 난진 슈춤보 랑 집에 삼루 슈춤보 이거라 돈다 두야 백 가보요레스 숨거다 돈다베 텐디 리가라 텐디웨 로 삼루 타샬데 랑 아시야데 메아조고레스 거래
Lasso. And so here in the text it says, for they will bring no benefit to me. And so in this case, this they will bring no benefit to me is identifying an individual, meaning an individual like that, an individual who has no room to think about you or anyone else. They think only about themselves. There's nothing that you can do to please them. There's nothing that makes them happy, and they will not be able to bring about any benefit for yourself if you are associating with them. Because when someone is clinging like so strongly from their own perspective, that's it. There's no really any place to go but there. So how can they help you? They can't benefit you. They can't help you. There's no room for that. And so that's the meaning that's meant here, that they cannot help to benefit you, and you in turn can do nothing good for them, because really all they're thinking about is me, 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 me. In that case, there's no room for help and benefit to occur. No, lasso.
Yunto samka karejina masupe semho papche nganjinda tene be nga I shujino mandroji jini lega chogat pe binsu ke chembure tingazu ratugudo samno nende tanudugala susula tene yungudo.
So we can think about what it even feels like for us when we're like this. When we are so fixed in our own position, so lost in our own story, someone else can try to talk to us, try to help us, talk something sense to us, and it goes nowhere. It doesn't help us. There's no room for that to occur. So this happens within us, and we should constantly be watchful to see if that's happening for us. This really such a fixation to our own position, to an I, to me, me, me. And realize that when we are feeling like that, now realize how much that influences your experience, influences what you do. When you're so strongly fixed to your own position, look at the influence this has on us, and see how that colors our actions, experiences, and so forth. It's really, really important that we always look at that, and we'll see it within ourselves.
Genjene di meazoya de shigor tati torundi yorda tinado tenna gawar gawe kujates
Yankerchik
ta tanda sholoka chubjipateki
lasso
chubjipateki dina tenna gawe kujates sigdo
that's quite ani konda kenla pelchernge di angtrang ani kakare tene gone sikche di gone detar dakdang shen tempa pelcher di mare pelcher
letter ring or asking jiminde
lasso tene chu ani chunga
chubjipade
okay ani
chongapade chazan tenne letter ring or chasidugala tendige ngar tendige karso ran chinjin shu chumbo de tape mazo mogo ine mijin jil cholcha gorwa tena ji ngarzinde nega tape mezgor minega ju phajole jasha gorese gore gompazunde je tende taring bujila ta chalale fecha gorwa 어떤 때는 저자 그래서 제 때인데 간진데게 슈춤보 연데겠는데 랑게 쪼부선이지 네보배 같은진데지 톰나 텐나 가외 귀자데 진천신도 민규로에스 아니 배 소소랑 오늘 진향이나 란진지 슈 총부에 갈 텐데 진지 서고 말때 잠시 미 구바제야단 텐데 연구 말아 소소라 경바 첨부질레게 연구하러 란진진 겐젠네 왔다 때시거래
올라서 dine di chele tak ani dine chile tarin ani tol warcha di sipede
졸war자
올라서 okay
아니 또서와 진천이도 민규로에스 진 아니 배 소소를 펜토이나 텔레 진천부 성공 말했어 간진 란진지 슈 준비에 미미되게 아니 타마빠좀 레퍼자스 아니 타마빠도 레퍼자 왜 메토 장지 진스 답에 마술 장마여로 안 장마 메토가니 줄레네 아니 메토기 주딜레 아니 메토라 견당거 말아 주딜랭거 와 어다 되나지 단지기 나랑 조이나 아니 최기 돈다데 최기 돈좀 나나니 굴라 dom체 마통징지 디바메 바 네버자스 다 최기 돈다데 최나네 카레 랍게도 돈다데 소소 친디다 치마니라 베게 돈다데 소소 랑시바 고레스 랑시바지네 당원에 말어 란친진 견들다네 아니 젠친진지야 아니 따뜻하게 신디라 배 투셔만도 저 치마이나 랭암바 미사야 따뜻히 제거해서 순거다
제발
저 치마라 랭암바 미사야 저 치마 랭암바 사고 말아 레이나 레장부 사그러와 어떻게 순거래
and so going back I think actually with the text that I have I'm using this Padmakara text, and so actually we've been discussing 15. So sometimes the Tibetan, the way that the translating team has translated it, they divide up the Tibetan in ways that sometimes the numbers are a little bit different. But let me read the English here on 15 is what I have. Therefore, flee the company of childish people. Greet them when you meet with smiles that keep on terms of common courtesy without inviting intimate relations. So we've already been discussing what kind of people we're talking about. And so we should really, as we've been discussing, you know, it's not helpful to be with people like this. That doesn't benefit us. They're also never happy. And actually, they don't really have, you know, so much room for anything but themselves. And when when someone is coming from a place of me, it's all about me, then this is where afflictive emotions just become stronger. And they can influence us. So here in this text, what it says here is, or what Geshe is saying, when it means that we should have common courtesy, what it means is don't get any closer. Really not, become too close. We want to be a little bit distant, have some distance to them. And so that's a really important point, to really just be friendly, but keep our distance to those kinds of people. And now for me, what Geshe next began to explain comes into verse number 16. So I'll read verse number 16. Like bees, tanda di sikje lona like bees that get their honey from flowers, take only what will serve the practice of the Dharma. And so just like when bees are going about their work and collecting nectar, they go to that flower and they take what's essential, actually. The nectar is what is very essential for them to produce the honey. And they take that what is essential, they take what they need. And we need to focus our energies and activities in a way that we're taking what's essential for us and what we need. And that's the Dharma. We need to take that which will benefit us in this life and that which will benefit us in future lives. And that is really taking what's dharmically related. And so it also means to abandon that which is not. So we should abandon self-clinging, and we should take up, we could say, other clinging. Abandon self-cherishing and take up other cherishing, really caring about others. That's something that will protect us in this life and actually go on to protect us from negative karmas and negative influences in future lives as well.
Lojong Tundi Menandigiore, Lelen Tamje Chilandas, Lelen Tamje. Tati Karsa Nangazo, Kun Yoya Jiza, Kun Yoya Kanga, Karatuna, Ranchinsil Tundu, Sungore. Pe Talamanji Pa, any pe Dungalkia, Numunkia, Jiza the Ranchinsil Tunde Jas, Lelen Tamje Chilandas. Ranchin Tella Tunde Shas Sungore. Jason Ranchin the Tendeki, Kunjina, Kupangu Redua. Mazo Zungal Gugua Marwa. Jason Zungal Mogona, Zungalgi Gupme or Mado, Zungal Mebergurshis and Bezomache, Malam Temnet to be a Marwate. Kanchi Chetunga to tem bezunjene, Kokale, la semigula magi zorwa. Pemis Kachimore.
Semgimegu.
Semigula meazorwa, ranchins in the Suzigula meazorwa. Semitanim Papigorwa.
Oh, lasso.
Ranchins in Semtana Yorwa,
oh, Rang Sem, oh, lasso.
Rank Semitana Yorwa. Ranchins in this Semgi Kunroa.
Yeah.
Gyundem Sangura, Mezogura.
Yeah. And so
Geshe Cheka was Mure. Lelen Tamse Chilandas.
Lasso Ani Dune Le Lensena Ani
Lelen said the Kun Tape Mazo Dungalio Yadan Tape Kunda Numundan Concro Tenimampo Kigdua. Tendiki Gyundegi Tamse Ranchin Teni or Esila.
Lasso Lengen or Le Len?
Lelen and Padanta take it Kanga.
Oh, lasso. And so Geshe Chikawa has said that all of our negative karma, all of our afflictions, all of our negative thinking, all of our suffering and pain and misery, known virtue, all comes down to self-cherishing. Actually, ultimately, it all comes down to that one single fault, the fault of simply caring about oneself, about one's own side, one's own perspective, one's own ideas. Everything comes down to that. And these afflictive emotions are all based on the self. And therefore, we need to abandon clinging to a self, fixating on our own position. And actually, we don't want to be unhappy. We don't want difficult circumstances. We don't want suffering. And if that's the case, then we have to eliminate what causes that. And there's no prayer that can do that. There's no aspiration that can do that. So what is it that we need to do? We need to eliminate it from the perspective of the mind. We need to eliminate the faulty mental attitudes, which are these causes that bring about the suffering. As Geshe Chikawa had said, that all of the negative karmas and experiences come from that. Ultimately, it all comes down to that one thing, coming from the orientation and perspective of oneself. And so we must look at that, see how it is a big mistake, does not work in our favor, and we need to eliminate it.
대단 그상 네 오늘 때인 봐. 주고 야다 가서래. 아 지바랑게 던지던 투원생기 던지빈 니닝기니 개발도 있어야 돼. 제제 삼당기나 펜도도와.
야포 드링기면도.
그래서 쇼로가 야당 가서 있는 지래 야당 니수서 좀뭐 니 숨주되나 지래 니요도 요래.
라서.
지바랑게 던지던.
Leo Shandakinanla.
Liu Jenda Mara, Liu Nigarangre. Sologa Yadan Kazo in the Chile, Kazangal Timba. That is all. Dikapula young Yankur, Samtang in a pep and young word.
And so Geshe is saying that
Shologa Tawa.
He's looking for a particular verse that we have already gone through, and that he would like to cite again.
Something.
Okay. So we talked about it maybe before. Sorry, it's still to come, and it is in this. Oh yeah. Okay, I think I remember it was in 129 verse in our text. Okay, so let me turn back to that. Okay, I don't have the Tibetan in front of me, but I have the Yankerchek Pokela. Lasso 100. Okay. And so actually it's verse number 130. Where it says, is there need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves, while Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them? So true, right? We can see it's basic. It is this basic difference that makes all of the difference between whether one is a sentient being or a Buddha. Ordinary beings who think only about themselves, work for their own purpose, we could say, are still stuck in samsara. They're still circling in samsara. Whereas those that work for the benefit of others become enlightened. As it said, all of the perfect Buddhas have come about from the altruistic mind that wishes to benefit others. So it all comes down to whether we're based in self-cherishing or other cherishing.
Manam jinzi yenden gungi jings. Jen pe man simche tamchiki tonda chede, yenden tamchiki jungung, yenden tamchiki jin salta bure labre. Mesibu yabodoa. Odati so ngazo letif she chewe wangetis ko kaboyara, kona semla jurboyare, pempoyare. Samlo yang to tawo pe misiba ke chembore.
Ai susung pare lama lama na
Pension lozan chegen.
Losang chupkin.
Pension lozan chugi galse. Lama chupene yare. Rani jinjin gupak kungi lo manam jinjin yene kungi jing. Teacher dajin jembe najurki nyamne ngimbo lembar jingi lo zersung yare. Pe misiba ke chembore ta.
Okay.
Tadi
Pelcher ani pelcher gesela dene ngala ani di puyik di kerangi ngala ani na dene maumpala nga takta injike lage
kurgo.
So
Tadi jama yada chusumba de yada sumjuba de kaptula ngajun reche mangbu yongora. Manga yongore. Tidi pengi da tanangi lung da tangsha gore.
Oh laso.
Ani samutang tandane samutangi na jamating ta rajin jebe tape samutang sa de tingin le gorta. Pe misibe kechembore.
So this is a very, very, very important point that's brought up here in verse number 130. And Geshe says that he will definitely speak more about this because it's such a key point. And so he'll be speaking more about it in the future. But also then within the Guru Yoga Puja, the Pension Lobsang Gyaltsen, Chugin, Lobsang Chugin, has composed is a beautiful verse that Geshe said, I requested he send it to me in Tibetan, and I will try to provide for everyone a nice translation. But the meaning of this verse is that every single difficulty, pain, suffering, and unhappiness that we experience comes down to self-clinging. And all happiness and benefit is accomplished through cherishing others. And so again, it comes down to it comes down to what's being said here. If we're cherishing ourselves, we have one experience. If we're cherishing others, we have another, as it says here. Childish beings look out for themselves while Buddhas labor for the good of others. And Geshe will have more to follow on that particular verse.
Karo shologo sumdegi ranchinjinde pe pangthande ku kyonyendem ku myazo gorese labgora pango gorese sungorwa oda tipe kyonde rapta yung ngaranzu semnala rathoba jiguwar deina rathoba so semla oh nida yabumindu sambat samlodu kortu guwar
lasa
temada ngazo pe ranchinji shu chumbo chendena yabo amarwa oda tere.
And so it really when we are self-cherishing, here is the process that comes about due to that. We're coming so strong, fixated on ourselves, and due to that orientation, to that focus on ourselves, something comes up and all of a sudden we're brought to hatred or anger. And under the influence of great anger, we act out, and under the influence of anger, do things that are the accumulation of negativity. It's negative action, negative karma. So what's happening is one is hurting oneself. And so one hurts oneself and one suffers. And so this is something, we have to see it as something that is a fault within ourselves, actually. It's mistaken. It's a fault. And what is it said? It's very clearly said within the teachings. What do we need to do with this fault of self-cherishing? We need to get rid of it. We need to eliminate it. And when we eliminate it, we eliminate the afflictive emotions that are related to it, that then influences us. So then we eliminate those as well. And so what we have to do is we have to, while in the experience of this, catch it. We have to catch ourselves, and we have to come to that aha moment and say, there it is, and this is not good, and I need to fix this. And so that's something that we really need to work on, is to work on those methods to eliminate it.
Yeah, that solo chutu patege kanche ngajel ki nimi shikor ngajel ki kun sem keng ba ngajel zede sem keng be na ba chinjirwa digi kun am nimi ti shikore sungores
la so pelchur ngala ani chup
chutu patege
chudumpa
wa
yeah dak ni nimang
re chudum patege
laso yeah all right laso
chudum patege ngajel ki nimi kun ti shikores vane nyemung kurti ches vala mangpo gabochi tende semba chakyo shiwe oto njiba keze sungtoa tangaranzo chik vani nyepa sidikala yu penjor tape tam nyenda tikiti kangarwa sindila diyena ngatsol semkheng baji legirwa semkheng baji ene itimboje yungora ene sozo gabone yungora teni yu penjor tam nyenda garo yana teni pe kyunjenda garo sanza semla kengba legirite tende gi ene pe sem kengba nambade dedi semla jakpa chende sem kengba ma jakpa tende cheba ina lengamba sa te wange lengamba sane chiyo de pe dungal mangbu nyongre ten jikpa chimbo yongre ze sungre tengone rawa tupa ishe gala jama tande pe gala tam nyenda tende kenjene yu penjor sayala pe kenjene nipa mabu sage dipa tegede pacha tupa ishe gala pacha jade ti kewa chima ti lengamba sadu korwa
la so pena yang kechik de kola
tanda tam nyenda yu penjor tondala ngazu kale mambo mi khaje ki kyazun shigo mi khaje thama chigo duschene migo mambo soje de chigi orwa ani ti wange ani tuba ishe ngazu seme dang la paja jare legi paja de ta neminde mingugro miyungro dungal yungro ende jiba chimbo ni chiwo to jiba keze de otri
yeah lasso Now we have verse number 17, and verse number 17 speaks a lot about being arrogant, being really all caught up in oneself, being so proud of all the things one has accomplished, all the things one has, being very, just, patting oneself on the back quite a bit. And pointing out the fault in that. So this is a kind of another perspective or another flavor of affliction that's really dealing a lot with what happens when we like ourselves a lot. when we feel so proud about our wealth and possessions, and we get very pumped up and full of ourselves. When we're pumped up and full of ourselves, actually, this in itself is a negative state. And to get to that point when we care so much about like getting things, like we're very materialistic in terms of our wealth and possessions or our position or getting building a reputation. And if we think about it, to accomplish these things, there's all kinds of bad behaviors, negative behaviors that we can engage in to get there. In order to get these kinds of statuses, for example, we're competitive or we're very divisive in order to, get the renown that we want to get. We think about it, and there's a lot of actions that we do that are actually negatively motivated. They're negative, karmically negative, and karma needs to ripen, right? So these karmic imprints that we have created need to ripen, and they will ripen into a suffering experience. And so this is really speaking about this arrogance and how it negatively affects us, and why we need to abandon it. And then later, what will happen is, because we know this karma is going to ripen, we become fearful, because then we know later on, this life, next life, this is going to ripen. And so we're fearful, we're scared about what this is going to bring us, actually.
Yeah, that those karma
Okay, so before we take a few minutes of a break, let me read aloud that particular verse in English, verse number 17. Oh, I'm rich and well respected. Lots of people take delight in me. Nourish such complacency, and later, after death, your fears will start. So now we take a break, Geshe-la. Okay. So let's take about a 5 or 10 minute 5 or 10 minute break. Take what you need, but Geshe-la says about 5 or 10 minutes.
Gosh.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay. Most people are probably back, but also I realized when Geshe-la was speaking about something, so within the 4 powers of like to purify karma, so he quoted one of those that I actually translated, that I just crossed my mind when he was saying about Geshe-la was saying how important it is to acknowledge, like to recognize a fault within ourselves and acknowledge that. And he said, other than that, actually, I had said that we won't pledge to not repeat it again, but actually what Geshe-la had said in Tibetan is, he said that like the power of regretting it, to feel bad about it, won't come about if we don't recognize it as wrong. So I just wanted to correct that.
Shubloka kare chopke padrawa. Chopke padran churgu kangpa tampuni di yongware. Karazanati chaping nimi chape kyunshi gora. Ngatsu chayul jiorwa. Chapa kesa. Monichana odati ko tekhyun shi gore. That 맞아 착바세데 지나는 주 미바주 이두알 미겨와 차베 팅이 된데지어래 미바주 이두알 미 남반 달카에 남바친 젤리 둥알키베 땡체 바젤 숭레 차바싱인데 간제다 자세 인고야 말아가지고 유응보 답에 카르단 답이 배 유중 이동화 된들라 가서 차선 기기 걸어와
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so now in verse number 18, in the first two lines in the Tibetan, I should say, in 19, this is discussing and pointing out the faults of attachment, things that we crave for, things that we crave, we desire, we want, we obsess over and so forth and get attached to, fixate about. This is, for example, those things that we get attached to, when they actually cause us suffering. In the beginning, there's something we find pleasant about them that catches our eye, catches our fancy, so to speak. We like it. And, but then we're hooked. There's a point of we get attached to it. And what that brings about is suffering. When we're attached to something, it brings us suffering. So the way that process works is often it's if we say we take, a form, something, a physical form, something physical out there that we see, it catches our fancy and we like it. We find it beautiful or pleasing in some way. And then it hooks us. We get hooked and we're attached. And so we become attached to things out there in our environment. And so that's what this is, just these two verses are discussing, and how to work with that, how to abandon that.
대외 넘버 몽바 이세도 같아. 대외 시대가라 펜벨레 답 펜벨레라 몽데긴 미시바 몽바이 강다 강라 차지 바스타 때 차바게 율다베 리라와 칸김다 율종제보 단다메다 연구하러 주이동 강가 연구하래. 대다 대대 동기로 바스 따텔라 차바제네 에니베 너든 텐데 투에 요마르와 에니베 동결바 룽알니도 줄기당스 답에 룽알게레 마도데 디젠다 데덴 첨부트에 요마르스 데리 크비 차미자스 케바스데 랑돌라 케바 랑자강인 dor자강인 랑자 개위초데 강인 바데 에 싱이 dor자 미개위초데 강인 바데 싱이 랑돌라 케바지기 덴디니 차바 덴데 룽알게기 윤지바진 덴데라 니 차바치기 마레스 나때 순거래 인교 대야보도 왔대 대조배 하고도 아주 자비일 때도 즉 세나 아니 너중 조시제 하고 그러와 그래서 거기 와서도 그거 왔다 거네 지 딩현생인데 대바지 고야 믿어 지 딩현생인데 수소 거기 와서도 그거 알아 대바 그거 믿어
라서
대소래
And so in the verses here, first in 18, indeed, O foolish and afflicted mind. Here it says, O foolish and afflicted. And what's meant here is this is a mind that is enshrouded. It's confused. It doesn't know. There's an ignorance, a sense of a deluded mind, a sense of not knowing. That's what's meant here by, oh, you foolish and afflicted mind. It is dark and confused. It is enshrouded in ignorance. You want and crave for all and everything. And really, when we say everything, we mean everything. The sky's the limit here. There's no end to what we can want and crave and jones for, really. Sky's the limit. All this together will rise up. And it will, right? There's, you know, we're not satiated easily when we're attached to these things. And then as it says, as pain itself increased 1,000-fold. And so this can spin out, this can spin up. It increases and increases, and we actually, rather than experiencing pleasure, what happens is we end up experiencing pain. And this comes because of getting hooked and attached to whatever that is, to wanting it, to feeling like we need it and we want it. And then in the next verse, in verse number 19, since this is so, the wise have no attachments for such cravings. And so it says the wise. And what this means here with wise, so earlier we pointed out this being enshrouded in not knowing. The wise, with the wise, it's just the opposite. These are the sages that do know. These are sages that are wise to these situations and wise to these ways. They know what it is that should be done and what it is that should not be done. They're wise in those ways and have no attachments. From such cravings, fear and anguish comes. And because actually when we're attached, we, you know, it's the off button is very hard for us. We don't know how to shut that off. We are not easily satiated, and you know, there's no satisfaction. We want more and more. And actually, we do need things. For example, let's say it's about, you know, food. So we do need food. We need, you know, sustenance, but we don't need any extra. It's just what we need. Anything more is overboard. And so this is really great here. It really teaches us about how we end up getting hooked, and then how we have no satiation, and how this just ends up causing us pain and suffering.
that sologa jurgugi kangpa chimanyida nishutiki karlaga arzana debi yulla itemme pas debi ngazuda ngazu tungenji yorwa tesula tempo shire yo marella gore tingono ro ngazu khalajina khalade jidano luisoyare de ko zadanji nyen sona digi nasazu gudwa tempo se mindo wada tesore jire date pesore jire tesore da mambo yongurwa en wada dusre ditara jin dogurbe temba yido ratu tos cha nyepatan ni manjungin tatan nyepan junguri nyendan tape chojede kandun de tolme tos tabe ko chabe yun dirala tembo pe karso tembo jidi iten yendegen sutu de yendegen tendi taji tembaji ten zanin mare labre ngone ngaronzo tongje yo batere nemi ko tunjen dring auziana sangizude me charuda ngazu tongje yo bare nemi karso gore horgen tendione pe ri kombato jogai 타주드나 온다 빼 강가 잠에 주셔도 이때 민도가 어다 된되긴 더비 이때 매바다 삼무다네 아니 로추스 왜 샘데 수수 겨와 치마 펜젤라 대화 두비하게 답에 삼로 개회 철라 유튜브 중국어한테 뺏게 버리
And then in verse number 19 and verse, let's see. Yeah, so verse number, the last two lines in verse number 19 and then into verse number 20. And what we're talking about here are those outer objects that we become attached to. the objects, of the senses, for example, the things we see and hear and smell and taste and so forth. All of this materialistic things around us and things that we become attached to, speaking about the quality of those. And so here at the end of 19, and fix this firmly in your understanding. All that may be wished for will by nature fade away to nothing. For people may have gained great wealth of riches, enjoying reputation, sweet renown, but who can say where they've gone to now with all that baggage of their gold and fame? So these very things that we get hooked on, we get hooked on them because we buy into something, an aspect of existence in them that actually isn't really there. Because what we see is not as it appears. Things are not the way, appearances are deceiving. Something that might look to be, pretty good shape today can just completely break or just be gone tomorrow. Something that we apply some realness to the next day isn't even there. You think about, a beautiful house on a hill, and then there's a landslide or a natural disaster. It's gone. It's swept away. There's no stability. Not only are things not what they appear, there's no stability in them. Here today, gone tomorrow. And so we have to understand those objects that we get attached to, fixed to, are unstable and they're not lasting, and we need to focus more. We need to focus on what will be of real benefit, in actually lasting benefit in this life and in the next life.
Kore dabe ngomba tasam chi ide meda salvore. Tai COVID-19 gi zambuling gi jalkap topchen jalkap. Ani European da ta che Asian da kangala pe jung pesha mangbu kyongu mangbu dodwa. Kot tembo mene kyongu ra parwa. COVID-19 busin digi tata zamchi zambuli kyong mangbu tangdo. Ko tembo me inza ko kyong drar ma do tembo ina ko kyong ra e kono yo marwa.
Pel chil de tangsangi nere ani nere
netigi. Kenchen zambulingi page pe penjola kyong mangbu tangdo.
Really?
Ko tembo ji ina kyong pogu marwa.
Oh las.
Tegarang ke tembo me bata hago tu ase.
Just what we're speaking about here, so we've been talking about, wealth and possessions and really putting any merit in them and spending our attention on them, and that there's no stability. They can be gone tomorrow. And Geshe says, actually, we have a very good example of that right here and now, due to the virus. Look what the virus has done to the economy. Look what it has done to these nations who were once wealthy and powerful. We look at the markets, and the markets are crashing. The financial markets have really crashed, and that what we used to have, that, richness and wealth, all of a sudden it's gone. And that's because there's no realness to it. It can be gone. If there were any true merit and stability in that, there's no way that all of a sudden it could be gone. But that's not the case. And we see that right now in our own experience.
Jalkab kyunga dola, Jalkab ki sungshop don dala, Dulden Sonja Chebare. Tatandi Nazatela, Dulden Sonja Pentogundu, Mi Mangoyana Pentogumido, Turu Pe Dedua. Kache, Chitigala Tapuni, Ko China, the den, Tinken, the Tigri, den Tirite, Ko Item Marriage, Tempo Margin, but a silver Ratuguas.
Kennedy Dultrin the nuclear bomb.
Dulden Sonja game, Ko Shop to go Marwa. Ko Samidoa. You Jalkab Kyonga Dondala, Jalkab Kyonga Dondala, my the Jalkab Kyonga Dondala, Mami Jare, Dulden Sonja Zore. I kept to window.
Kare kept to Kimindo.
Tanda Nazade.
Oh,
Nazadela. Also in I kept to window. And I take Genjin Tape, also me Teso Mambushur Gore, Tape, Mone Yamsayare. Kanji Itemea Dembareta. That is some law Jarshini, and it's Susu Kewachiman Gedi Falan Joshevachinity, Gevichola Jartuvachin, Gedi Falan Chisheva Juna, Kewachiman is Susu Sensajidagra.
Oh, Lasso.
The mother tell us simply chain day in a Dumalino Kepsan Yomarwa. What that tea, Peggy Garsore. Chuchola Jartuvachuna, Yabodua. Oh, Tati, one Dembare, Nimbu Mindua, some Jitene, any you Benjor Sayaland, Tosu. Mato Soya war, Mato, Tele Lapuya Yomarwa. There's money catching for it.
And so, really, if we think about it, about really what is most essential and purposeful and what protects us, we think about the Dharma. But if we think, for example, right now we have the coronavirus, and the coronavirus that is wiping out financial markets, wreaking havoc in people's financial stability, personal financial stability. Can atomic weapons even protect us from that? I mean, we have Western technology has been developed like nuclear bombs, like, armies will fight and destroy so much with nuclear bombs. But can nuclear weapons protect us from this coronavirus? They can't. They can't protect us from the coronavirus. And so the ultimate armor that we can don to protect ourselves is virtue, because creating virtue will assure us protection in this life and in the next life. It is sure to be the armor that will protect us going forward. If at this time everything is kind of crashing and we're losing money and jobs and so much suffering and so forth, if we worry, that's not going to be of any benefit. We've got no profit, nothing to be gained there. But what we can gain and what we can focus on is the Dharma that is sure to be of benefit in this life and in future lives. Sitting around worrying, we must understand and look and see that there's no essential benefit in that. This is not something that is meaningful or beneficial for us at all. Actually, other than the Dharma, practicing the Dharma, there is nothing ultimately that will be of benefit for us in this and future lives.
Meratana Kundosagio Mara, Toratana, Rio Marala, Sora the Merala, Pene Deo Marellare.
Oh, lasso. So in verse number 21, this speaks about praise and disparagement. It's said that if we are praised, we shouldn't regard that as anything good and enjoy that. And if we're disparaged, then we shouldn't be discouraged and feel bad about that, because actually there is no ultimate benefit. Ultimately, whether there's benefit and harm to praise and disparagement is not a sure thing.
Dal susula ni be mera tanganji jenji na soba dagar chi chas susula ni mera tanganji na usen du goyo mare kyoran soba tanganji ores taji du te be khondruza te hyonje ga yo mare jenji gi kyoran la gagenji gi soba tang tora tangres dal sepe jenas ni dal tengen jenji na me any Chiki merala migar chijias, meratana mega choy miduas, sokenjen duas. Anita sora the merate, min campujiridua. Tichira penya midua. Anita sora la gatchetane, and sora tangende, gogudichini, susu yang tong raya jore. And merala diche, they take on the chadangini, ling a basaya yore. Sort of the meralate, she got eats bachay or marilla.
And so the first line in Tibetan here is actually the second line in my English translation, but in Tibetan the first line is, there will be those who scorn and criticize. And when actually someone puts us down, is actually, there's no, let's see, there's, oh, that's Go Thompson. Ani pokela di tsik, yeah, it is in Tibetan, is when someone puts you down. So dene merutangna ani michiki kerangla merutangna dene
kerang sendu goyo mar kondruza goyo mares. Kerang tupatangje yor walare.
Consola.
Oh, kerang ya jenje tupatanga gagenji tupatangirwa. Miga genji mera tangirwa. Ruchini doate.
That actually we shouldn't, when someone puts us down, we shouldn't get angry. We shouldn't, get upset about that. Actually, we should find some way to compliment them. We should find some way to return that with a praise, actually. There's no sense in us getting angry when they put us down, because actually sometimes we're disparaged and sometimes we're applauded, and this is not a sure thing, but we should not get angry when someone puts us down. And when someone praises us, ani dene konso ngatso later ani terpa tangna dene ngatso
sem kengbache de pe fuzing chagwayo mares meratana ni sem jumgwayo mares semengige ni pe pentoe ni yo mare ni ko sendi itsimba chagwa keke yo mares meratana takor jigidus mama kare Quando liu kaze ni chino roson.
Hola.
Kiran la yunden di jogu na. O ko yunden thonga yaburi sambar jamado yang kengba ke kichugyo mara sung do. Odaso chikbare.
And so when someone praises us also, we shouldn't get inflated about that. We should just say, oh, well, they've said some nice words, and okay, they said some nice words. So we don't get deflated when someone disparages us, and we don't get inflated when someone sings our praises. And actually, we spoke about it, Geshe said in a previous chapter.
Payo Luna re. Kuran la pe mijige 연된 조용도 갈라 아니 연된 쉐바 야보레 삼다마도 양 캥바키 주기와 말해서 숭도 바이올리우나라 아 데코 연된도 통화 야보레 섬들갈라 수소 캥발라기 말와 때마다 가서 레담보와 렘상 부징이 녀가요로
And so in the fourth chapter on, how do they call it? Awareness. This is about being conscientious. In this chapter, it said when someone praises us, what we should see is that it's not about us. Because if we see that it's about us, then there's a way that we become kind of arrogant and pompous. But rather, we should praise them that they're seeing the qualities. So what we're making it a point about is the qualities. It's like, oh, they're commenting on good qualities. But don't make it about us, because if it's about us, then it becomes, we can become arrogant about this. And so the reason that we avoid both of these roads, the getting inflated or deflated, is that actually we can create negative karma under these circumstances. Like if we get mad, if someone says something negative about us, then now we're angry. And so now there's negative karma. And so we shouldn't go there with it. Instead, we should just see it as they're pointing out certain qualities. And this is really important because as beginners, when, if somebody is, if we're not careful about this, we can take it in a way that instead of taking it on a positive road, it becomes something that ends up being negative for us, not helpful for us.
Diane.
Should I read in English here?
Yeah.
Diane.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Some of the books have that chapter translated as diligence.
Chapter 4? Bayu.
Yeah, Bayu is sometimes translated for some books as diligence.
Oh, that should not be diligence because it doesn't have that meaning. But thank you for pointing that out. So diligence is right, Sundru.
Bayu.
Bayu. Yeah. He said that
Bayu. Conscientiousness. Sorry, conscientiousness.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, conscientiousness would be definitely a very good. Here it says awareness, and I personally, in my this particular one, awareness doesn't quite, being conscientious about your behavior. Conscientiousness is a really great, but here in mine it says awareness. So in any event, this particular one in terms of disparagement and praise, in the text it says, why should I be pleased when people praise me? Others there will be who scorn and criticize. And why despondent when I'm blamed, since there'll be others who think well of me?
야부도와 니 메라탄 소소코이나 컨트롤 자마주체 오케이 엄마랑 소라탄 건제 요르사 섬다이나 소소 컨트롤 야 셈나 누구 말와
So really, this is really great, isn't it? Because now when we've got someone who comes and puts us down, we can look at it like, oh, they're, we'll look at it as praise. Oh, they're, actually praising me. They're, saying something positive. And when we think like this, then it's not harmful for us. We see it as praise.
디 겐체네니 소소 셈투 에니 콘트로자 데니제데 양텔리 두게 차고 망부용 녀가요로
가리망포 찹
텔리 겐체용 녀가요로
라소
텔리 두신 삼다이나 야부도 맞더라 땅에 요레서 삼다도 가라
If we think when someone, you know, when someone kind of tears us down, say, oh, we just think, oh, they're singing my praises. And in that way, there's no harm, you know, no harm. And if we think about the other side, if we get angry and fly off the handle, then we create negative karma. So they're actually hurting us even more so. They're hurting us, you know, twice over, because, you know, we'll experience the result of that. So actually, if we just think, oh, well, they're saying something nice, they're being nice, then there's no harm.
Sora tandile yan sora gabo chenje sora tana be pe sem kyane ya chi garu jin do do chi de chi thal she ge nyanga yore de do yan samda de o ngamera tangai ji yore ta de ke shira tendi ji re sam na su sem de pe tembo de grita ya bo yore de do samtang chochi de pe kit ma ki zin de sem na samtang chochi ge ni lemsa yuan roya yore.
And then when someone is saying such great things about us, you know, going on and on about your, you know, your qualities or accomplishments, whatever it is, ground yourself by thinking, oh, they're putting me down. So rather than getting so puffed up, you're, you know, floating away in your own, you know, pride over that praise, think, oh, they're putting me down right now. They're giving me a dressing down. In that, actually, that grounds you. It makes you very stable. So in one way, we don't fly to anger, and the other way, we don't get carried away by our own arrogance. So these are very grounding, and it balances. So actually, the mind, which can quickly actually, you know, flip from happiness to unhappiness, it's very, very easy to change. This is a way of working with the mind that stabilizes it and keeps it steady. And so, you know, in this way, guarding ourselves from being way too happy about something or way too upset about something, keeping really grounded. So methods like this for us to work with necessitate that we have to continually look inside, see what's going on, and work with it. Actually, this is a process. And we constantly have to stay engaged with this process, and it's very, very important.
Yeah, that's shologa nishu tani padra. That shologa nishu tani padra karzana. That tende samlo pusuto jibe samlo yendenge. Dedengim do dunzin jela. Dunzin zenenga zunyam to ruru jejoro. They kaboyores. Dunzin lani, dunzin leteni shirachigom, chabachigio maresila, dunzin, ruru jede. Digi dunzin jen dikyon de sungore.
Oh, lasso.
That's Simton Sidigalang or Solden Simton Dido, Mepa, da, Minda Kanda Mepa, Manda Yorwa, Tawa Manda, Kam Manda, Mepa Manda Yoindigala, Simton Mepa, not so big. Yawa Kani Mikuinas, Yawas and his Sangi, and it's Simton Mepa Damanda Idigala. So much and then they get Simton Kanka, Samberata, come to be Omarwas. Dumpachum then they get Simton Tam, Jagi, Las. Samberewa kong to be on Marwas.
Kong to
Gawanam Jamaguinas, Gavala and Kuba Mexican Junior. What a Mikuinas. Vandang and Michicos, Mother with Rape, Letambuba, Simjin Tendigi, semjen tamjege sembere wakandes kontugures. Dewenjide sambatans. Tele sose nepe gazo nuniji de samlo tangores. Odadus tende mado nepe jidela gazo tup gazo nuni range semba namtagone gazo tuba tele ni zuinachi di gewade kumpeldo tangade lambegores tate sungore.
Lampel
Compel
gore.
Gewa kun peljuya.
Gewa.
Jisu iran che ala soba ngwa gebela soba tatende susu kaza nuni che kaza tutu je gewa che zangpe chodi che. Yonsu soba da semje nga zong gutu kumara.
And verse number 22 now speaks about, so we've been speaking about the childish beings and the beings who crave and who are never satisfied. And when we talk about, so we've spoken about, childish, the childish type. Actually, there are so many different kinds of individuals. The proclivities and dispositions and capacities, the interests of individuals. Everyone is so very, very different. So that's what is pointed out here in the first line of verse number 22. So many are the leanings and the wants of beings, because there are just so many different kinds of individuals. We all do that, but we do it in different ways or have proclivities towards different things when it comes to that. That even here in Tibetan, it says the victor, and the victor means the Buddha. That even the Buddha couldn't fulfill what all of these different types of sentient beings, individuals could want or be interested in. There are just so many different kinds. Of such wretch, there is no need to speak. So of, all of that, of such a wretch as me, no need to speak. I will give up such concerns of worldly things. And so here, in giving up such concerns with worldly things, such as these longing and cravings and selfish views and so forth, now we have to look at what it is that we need to take up. It says give up worldly concerns, and what this means is to then fill your life with meaningful activities. Fill your life with virtuous activities. Accomplish virtue. Things, for example, such as doing good and also being happy for others when they do good, or rejoicing. Dedicating anything, always thinking about other sentient beings, always wanting to benefit them by dedicating anything good for their purpose. This is the virtue that we should be focusing on as we give up concerns with worldly things. And this is what is really best for us to do, and we do our best at accomplishing virtue.
Mula chumdende jal jube kabla. Ani chumdende chaure inju chaure gelon lekar sanji. Gelon lek pe karmasi ore. Kondan chaure lo ni sanga chumdende nyamdo june.
Sawo sana?
Sawo sana ta cousin jojubu.
Nephew.
Jojubu. Ani Koran dus nyenare chomdendege. Indi lo nishu senga pe chomdende nyamdo jure sangi nyamdo. June ni pe lo nishu senga la Chumdendele yunden chia mathora gelon lekergi. Chumdendele yunden menni mathoma marwa. Chumdendele yunden stile samni mikaba yorde. Korange pe vipinge yun mathore. Wada tendi indugala susu lengam pada tendi ne chumdendele ngutu mido. Hama koshini nyawa kere.
Lekpe karma.
Lekpe karma o. Ta tendaji ne ni pe mambo chumdende pe mudi pe samba mambo chumdende ndulirwa. Chumdende nangpa chukure. Tendi yungore. Kyawa ngame leda molamonge chumdende tulmotuwa kangdeyorwa. Sange trame chumbe madulwe marundu ke nidin roala de sungutwa. Kungone tendi yore chumdende. Tendi lugala ngazu labade mi semla mach jenla machuna injiminji uzuge giyomar kaga jashana kondindu gorwa suzu latigala kawang labade jempen yanda bache de lap te mangona mango ko ne labade yawo shibujinde kongu mindu zerde yang techi giyomare
Lasso ani sikche tamade de kare yawo
sangi trame chembe mathulwe Sangita Mambu Peverwa, and the Matul Ganger, Maroon Nitis, Maroon Nimiti, Tuinima, Nomonima, Nimang Aziorwa, Seni Mazade, or Maroon Dulka, Nitin Roala, Zelsure. Lamachubene Chigare, Mazu, you got Laba Injimi Kangas now and Roy or Mare. Mandra yonsegare chomdende sung the seng nyengemena ngazoda the telige indi in roa ina yan tepe shirage susu labade pensem kuni kute lab hore mangina ko korala mangona che yomarwa what the tendijire
And so at the time of the Buddha, then the Buddha had a relative, his nephew, Lekpe Karma, who was called Lekpe Karma. Lekpe Karma.
You know.
Yeah, Lekpe Karma or Lekar. And he actually stayed with the Buddha actually for a long period of time, like in between the time he was 10 and, up to 25 years old. And so he was with the Buddha for a very long time. He was a relative of the Buddha and was with the Buddha. The Buddha who, as we know, has incredible qualities, was an amazing sage of great wisdom. And at 25, then Lekpe Karma said that actually he saw no qualities whatsoever in the Buddha. Even with all of those qualities, he didn't see any qualities. And due to actually the fault of this and due to his karma, it's actually said that even though all that time with the Buddha, that he in his next life took birth in the hell realms. And so even though he was so close to the Buddha and stayed together with the Buddha, he didn't have faith and see qualities in the Buddha's words, in the Buddha's qualities, and went to the hells. And yet there are others actually that weren't Buddhist and didn't even, like in the beginning, start out as Buddhist. They were non-Buddhists, but through having met the Buddha, then the Buddha was able, they were tamed, they were freed. They became Buddhist, actually due to their former life's karmas and aspirations, that although they were not Buddhist in the beginning, they became Buddhist. And so just as our previous verse said that the Buddha, or this verse says that the Buddha cannot fulfill all of these various proclivities and dispositions, because of the various dispositions and proclivities, it's not sure that, the Buddha can fulfill all of their needs in this life. And there is a verse that comes also within Lama Chupa in Guru Yoga that that there, where was it?
Sangitame chombe matulwe maru
Uh-huh.
dulka nitin roala asar sungre.
That all of the countless Buddhas, so there have been many, many countless Buddhas that have come, that cannot tame some. There are some that can be tamed, but in this degenerate time, there are some that cannot be tamed. So there are the 5 degenerations, and one of them is the degenerate time. And so in this degenerate age, there are even all of the countless Buddhas cannot tame all of these beings. And so, as we can see in that, story, not all are necessarily going to be Buddhist and are going to actually have the proclivity or disposition or interest to be Buddhist in this lifetime. There are some that won't listen. There are some that are not going to hear it. So, for example, you could explain something to someone if they were interested, and tell them a little bit. And if they weren't interested in hearing anymore, then you say no more. And what it is that you do say when someone even shows some interest to hear something is you speak about the altruistic mind, the wish of focusing on others, of serving humanity. So we don't have to go on and on and on to those people who don't listen after we have said maybe something about, serving humanity and serving other beings. Other than that, then we don't go anymore if they're not interested. There's no reason.
Aje theta jijing tu gomta nyumong chungwa zare. Thebetade theba mambo chebetadela lunga gi choba de jijing tu lo guare.
Kondak ani tepa dela.
Theta jijing tu lo. Thebetade theba mambo chede pe chuen ne theba mambo chebe te ta zendala kare na lunga isung gi chob kuncho jiarwa. Te jijing tu lo guare. Theta jijing tu lo. Gomta nyumong chungwa omgene tatela karedna suzishigila nyomundi chungruena omge be kochbare.
Oh, ta hakoson. Okay, laso tene yanke tepa mangpo ani dita.
Theta jijing tulwa. Thepe tate
Jijing tulwa.
Jijing tulwa. Pe lunga gi cholam de pe jampo tulbo guguar.
Tulbo, okay.
Jijing tulwa.
Okay.
Subraje mayimba.
Laso.
Ni theta jijing tulwa. Gomta nyomung chungwa zar sumre.
Okay, Pelcher ani sikche di yang kirangi ngala nangroche.
Di
Maumpala.
Yeah.
Yamena yigi.
Yeah.
Laso.
Yeah.
Laso. Okay.
Thepetate jijing tulwa. Lunga gi chopa. Ngani kaje sheyena pe ti tubo mayimba ti jambo mi amjola tebaji guguare. Eni kunche de zangbo guguare. Thepetate tendeji guguare.
Laso.
Gombetate la nyomung pe shigigi susugula nyomung chungru guguare. Eni gombe kochobare. Gomtate tumbare.
Laso. And so it's said that a sign of someone who has studied the Dharma, who has learned the Dharma, that in all of their words and actions will not be coarse. Meaning someone who has learned and studied the Dharma will then go about in their daily activities and be very kind and the words that they use will be very smooth and easy to listen to. So, you know, they will just be very gentle and smooth and be very wholesome in their activities and in their speech, actions and speech. And a sign of someone who has habituated meditation is that they will have fewer afflictions in the mind stream. Their minds will not be so caught up in the afflictive, with the afflictive emotions. So they also, in their actions, they will be very harmonious. And so this is a sign, the signs of listening to the Dharma and the signs of meditating.
Yeah, that teaching is awesome.
So we're going to stop here for today because we're out of time.
Karma 정화지 치치다서.
Lasso.
그래서 좋아요베스. 그래서 텔레멘은
Lasso. So we could spend a few minutes on questions. Geshe said, if you have a question, please ask.
Just real, not a question, but real quick. Lepe karma in Sanskrit is Sunaksatra. And he is the half-brother, he was half-brother to the Buddha. Chomnendeki Cheya.
Saure ingo.
Punya.
Punya Cao, nephew.
Yeah. He was half-brother
nephew,
to the Buddha.
But
아자가 부구이나 저지 부구이나 미세 간제 훈자래. 사오래.
Lasso pena achagi bugo di, yeah, it's nephew, the way that Geshe is explaining it.
맞아 nephew 라그랬다. 내가 또 사오 라그래.
Oh,
사오는 인지는 nephew 라그다.
Lapkadodo.
어때다?
Rangjin Yeshe says Chomnendeki Cheya. Yelong Lepe karma jeja.
이래.
It says his half-brother.
I think, yeah, and I think
아메리카 half brother은 아주 찌빠찌기랬다. 그게.
Well,
everyone
is auntie or nephew.
아메리카 제가 망보여라.
Yeah. So I believe you, Mark, 100%.
Yeah.
I think the point is, I think the point I took away in trying to interpret what Geshe was saying is he was very, very close to the Buddha, spent a lot of time with him, and still it wasn't his karma, or he didn't have the capacity or proclivity to become Buddhist. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
남배 결혼지 첼타롱네 냐와기교 신시대 결혼을 같이교래.
Oh.
로타기네 전된데로 공단 차오지 로니시쟁한 접시주인데 연된 전된데 연된기를 맡아라고 로타기네.
So actually, he was a fully ordained, and Geshe said he was an attendant of the Buddha. He attended Buddha for 25 years. 25 years, and he didn't see the qualities.
이제선 전주나 야완 남게 먹으나서도 야외 먹긴 진시지래.
반다티.
야외 둘 못된 야완 구밤이 좋긴 여러 와다. 진시지다 남배gelong 레ker자는 디고래.
Oh, Lasso. Like, yeah, that there are people who don't see the qualities in the Buddha. There are those even, among monastic that don't see the qualities of the Buddha.
Yeah. So,
did you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So last week, when we were talking about the Tara practice, or maybe it was even the week before, Geshe said to not diffuse our accumulation by practicing other deities and to concentrate on the Tara practice. So given that, at the same time, I had been studying Amitabha practice, and I've always really been attracted to Pure Land, and that particular imagery is easy for me to visualize. So I was just curious if he would comment on that and say what the relationship is between Amitabha and Tara, because I know that he appears above her crown, and just any comments he would have on that practice.
Okay. Canceling Geshe-la. Really, ani ngoma kiranki di drama ki kola ani di yenmak tumpa ki drasiden nangla ani di lapsong ani pena ani dene yeda mangpo ani drup tuparchena dene ngone chena chikyang ani duki yomare yene yedam chik yapo ani chachang duki yore chesang kongi sampala namkyun nga amita hobame ani nyamlan chegir yene ta ani pangore dorma chik ani di nyamlan chegore dindre yena yang ngone obame la ngala ani dwelwa yerpa ki tsorwa nangshin ani tsoggido dene dorma dang obame ki dwelwa kariyore obame da ani nyamlandi ani pangore pe dorma chikpo
tendi labgo mare sirwa maso popat joji bale adi chegi disunwa kyo papa nam labre lagyat tenjang lachi mitub labre la pa la mangbuji lejo chigware de chetan de mashe insan lachi kan tutu midus yagar panam lachi tumne lagyat lachi tene lagyat sunre lachi janchi la suatemne lagyak ki enbe di dutu res kanji ngoji tatu gorwa la de ngo tade tasha de la eni be ndeme tonje de chani chige ngutu nang higo mare jojo ba de dishige sunre de kyo popanam lagyaten dan lagi mitups na jagar panam laji ten lagyatups ten ta shewar date oba me da jizun roma cherise te son dewa chumbo are dewa me kyo ten mare ani 율춘이 오네 콘데 로지 스무도아
율니 로직
콘데 춘이 오네 로지리 콘데 니가 어떤데요 레스 당이
라서 게실라 디 스르보도 디 콘데 디 로직 파데 디 존다 카코 송이 나얀디 드라마당
자자 니루고네 다 깡가 라깡가 뭐지 버차되어다 Nilu
yeah.
Kepari omare. Ni jidun roma de tumna oba me cheko maraz lage omaraz.
Re. Chetan ani dayan sang ani kong dela lapna ani kande do inayandi wo bagme rubne drama yang group.
Tugre. Te tugre. Te kepari omare.
Laso.
Ani tadum 티 케프리오 마레 오파메단 지준도마니 베 지준도민디 주겐라 오파메 울레겐즈도 그지징긴 롤라제디 제리지 젠니 통브라 봐 지준도마 데소베 내가 첨부하래
올라서
근데 야미 두바포랑라 사무탕상게 마시나 라갸템바이나 두시금 laji tu mare labre
laso
an tu ta ma shi barwa pope ke pe late zo ngo thadel tashara tidi ki popare ta tande popa mare
laso
karzana tidi joji bada di chape gala bola pe temba nyam cha shu ji jung kabre de
kadugi kapre
temba nyam cha chane
temba
nyam ne
tempanyam.
Tendi chung kala, ani, nang chuyong suzo bachi ma sheche, min pe mijikolo mangbu chiga rani joju bada de chiga de sungre tanda popatu so yantendi ya marda kanga phusum soba chade yare
thanks
joju bada de chiga sadam ta inda lobjong chebara
so Geshe says that in particular, this was an example, but it doesn't mean that one cannot continue to practice their own personal Yidam deity. In particular, at that time, when we discussed that a little bit ago, there was this quote that came up from Palden Latisha that said, oh, you Tibetans, you practice 1,000 deities and don't accomplish even a single one, but us Indian practitioners, we practice one and accomplish 100. But actually, so what he was saying here is that when you practice and supplicate one deity, this is like supplicating all of the deities, because the deities are singular in essence. Outwardly, there are many Yidam deities, but they all share the very same essential essence. So actually, when we supplicate Tara in particular, it said that, she can accomplish with her enlightened activity, she can accomplish our supplications. But the thing is actually supplicating one deity is like supplicating all of the deities. It's like having there are two objects with the very same inner essence. That's why it's said that actually samsara and nirvana are of one taste. They are actually of one essence. And it's that very essence that we must realize. It's actually the true mode of abiding, that true inner essence that we must practice. And yes, so actually practicing Tara and practicing Amitabha are the very same, actually. If you practice Tara, you're practicing Amitabha. If you're practicing Amitabha, you're practicing Tara. They're a singular essence. And as to your question whether there is a connection between Tara and Amitabha, there is a very close connection. So at the head of each deity, on the crown of each deity, there's the crown ornament. And for Amitabha, it's the crown ornament of Tara. And so what was being said with that Tibetan, that saying from Atisha really came down to the fact that the Tibetans didn't know how to accomplish a deity. They were spreading out their energies. And at the time that Atisha went to Tibet, this is a time that the teachings were in degeneration. They were degenerating. And so what Atisha was trying to do is bringing into focus how to correctly and fully practice. And so nowadays, so he brought that essence of correct practice back at the time the teachings were declining. And in this current modern time, this is all turned around in Tibet, where the deities are now being correctly practiced. Karenyi? Oh, la soya.
Rangla mako maimba jiku te data po jiku guare tela ngalde la gore jenla susu ta nyibo mi jembi yona tele mi ko aji susu amjolo ko aji 아니 자다 따보지 야보지다 단나가준 로마 교도랑이 또 슈춤불라거든 옴달에 두달에 둘이서는 제나 미망보지라 고 나한테 딱 보지 요나 선데 때려버려도 오늘 저랑 아들 저한테 말해 아들 저한테 랑라 거야 젠라 미고야 주고 와래 딱 가서 고배운 게 도스전에 니제나 미 소마 사바 용엔도 졸라 라타 따보 레야 돈달라 랍거와
Yeah.
다 일대지도 가라 되니 랑라 거 있냐 말아 배 sembatang nga ke thanda thangor samlutane nga samlutane lusene ani inil deyadere be di ilde yabu je choshena jogum yabu ngorda jogum chela pento gore ani so ilde chela be temba shibu jur gore ilde chedi kebre gore te soname chambu sa gore
So actually, the Yidam deity that would be good for it's good to practice whatever Yidam deity that one has great faith towards, one with a connection of great faith. That is the deity that would be good for one to practice. And then also to speak a few words about reciting the mantra of the deity, of accumulating the mantra. There are actually two ways of accumulating the mantra. One that is verbally recited and one that is mentally recited. And when we verbally recite a mantra, actually the way that we should recite it is in a way where it is only we ourselves who can hear it. We're reciting it very, very quietly, so that if even someone were to be sitting next to us, really it's only we ourselves that can hear the mantra and not them. And so this is just a very very quietly recited mantra. And Geshe said that when he was teaching on the 7 limbs to Tara, he purposefully said it, remember when he was doing Om Tare Tu Tare, and he was very loud with this. This is so that we could all hear the sound, kind of the cadence and rhythm and the sounds of the mantra and how it went. But this is not ordinarily how we would do it. Ordinarily we would do it so that it's only we ourselves can hear it. And then the second, the mentally recited mantra is when we're reciting the mantra, but actually it's not coming from, it's something that we are mentally reciting. We're not speaking it. We are very connected mentally with the mantra and staying on track with the mantra and saying it and maybe keeping track of even like how many mantras we're saying. And no one can hear it. It's not the people beside us or even ourselves. We can hear it in our mind only. This is the mentally recited mantra. And this actually is very meritorious. There's a great deal of merit collected here, because what happens is you will need vigilance. You'll really need focus and to be mindful and really keep it when you're doing the mental recitation, so much so that it becomes a meditation. It becomes resting meditation, and it's also very, very meritorious practice, meritorious action. So in this way, it becomes both. It becomes mantra recitation and meditation. It becomes very, very highly meritorious. Dine this just any custom.
가좀 넣으세요. 일대제야다. 이니. 아니 탕가다.
So really, Please, for all of you, when you are doing your mantra recitation, hold it in your mind and do this mental recitation. Hold it in your mind, hold your mind very still, stay very focused, and you can still use your mala and count your recitations, and this would be very, very good for all of you to do.
What day in time? All day, ilde karchana. Defa thing in the pay, catch him for his.
Defa e.
Defa, oh, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. And when you do so, whether you're reciting softly aloud or whether you're doing it mentally, it's very important to stay connected with a feeling of faith, of deep faith.
Yeah. Watch it.
Okay. So now let's do our dedication.
Kari rawe korove shinkamde penda dewa malin jungwe. Chere ziwang tenzin jatso ye jabe sipe bardo tengyu chi jampal pa chiltara kemba tang kundo sampo ten teji. Teda kunji jesu dalabachir dewa andida tamje rato nga tisum shepe. tamche ke ngo kanla choto nga pa tang la jen ke ve tsawa de zampo che chi rato ngo waragi.
In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person, Shenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience and Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
That's all. Thank you. Tashi dele.
Tashi Dele.
Tashi Dele. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.